All right. Welcome everybody to our July Advocates Network 2023. In the chat, if you would please put your name, your personal pronouns, what city you are zooming in from, and your organization or school. You can see my example at the bottom there. Ben Robinson, he, him, Denver, Great Education, Colorado. All right, Great Education's Colorado, Great Education Colorado's vision through public education, every Colorado student, regardless of their zip code, learning needs, language, identities, or the color of their skin, graduates prepared to lead their best life. And our mission, Great Education Colorado harnesses the power of grassroots activism and diverse, inclusive networks to guarantee that public schools in every Colorado community are welcoming and adequately, equitably, and sustainably funded. All right. Our goal, as always, for the GEC Advocates Network is to create a space for us to build community and take action together. This happens the second Tuesday of every month from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. I will go ahead and drop a link in the chat for the August meeting in just a few minutes once we start our discussion, so that everybody here can get registered early. And just as sort of a little primer, in August, we're going to be talking about the ballot. For a few years now, I think 3 or 4, we've had something called the Public Education Voter Campaign, which is our effort to make it a little bit easier to vote the right way, or the right way as we see it, on ballot measures that come up during the election. Community commitments always move up, move back. I know everybody here has great things to say, but let's not all talk. Well, it's impossible for all of us to talk all the time, so let's give each other space. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. Let's learn together. We all bring different experiences, whether we were teachers, school board members, whether we currently work in education policy or did it sometimes in the past, parent, former student, whatever it is. So let's put our heads together and make the most of this experience. And then last but not least, presuming positive intent, but acknowledging our impact. Every once in a while, we say something that rubs somebody else the wrong way. So it is our job in a space like this, that is built on togetherness and wanting to achieve the same goal, to make sure that we are treating each other with respect. And if those lines are crossed, to make sure that we are righting wrongs. All right. This is the second installation of what we are calling our Summer Advocacy Series, or Summer Series. Basically underlying all of this is creating welcoming schools, and that doing that requires action at the state, district, and local levels. So June was state level. We had an awesome discussion with some legislators about the best way to contact them, the best way to really sort of develop a relationship with them outside of the session, and then also went into a great discussion about future things that people on the call and legislators were interested in working on together. In July, in this meeting, we're going to focus on the district level. So school boards, how they operate, the influence they have over policy, et cetera. And we're lucky to have a few school board members with us tonight, and I will introduce them in just a moment. And I didn't know who all was going to be here, so we didn't fill in the screen. So I'm just going to say that with us right now, and I can't see who else is coming in, so if anybody else is on the board, please speak up. But we have Jan Tanner, former board member, and then DJ Anderson, a current board member. And our first question tonight, and because we don't have many people, we're just not going to do breakout rooms. We're going to go in the whole session here. But our first question tonight is, what do school boards do? What is their function? How do they interact with the superintendent? How do they influence district policy? So I want to kick it over to DJ and Jan to start us off there. And then as we go on, we can ask questions about this question, and then we'll have another big question afterwards. So let's take it away.
Well, thank you.
Go ahead.
What's our function? Sometimes I feel like our function is to take some abuse, but mostly our is to be the conduit between the public and our school district. We have For our board, we have 7 members. And so the 7 of us, our one employee technically is our superintendent. So we oversee him, is what we have here. And then we also do policy, and we do governance policy. And so we govern by making sure we have policies in place to set the direction of our district. One of the other big important ones to me is the budget. And, you know, we have to approve the budget, and we have to try to balance the low funding that we have with all the needs that we have in our district. And that is a challenging task at times. I also think as a board, it is our responsibility to make sure that we are not only in touch with our community, but in touch with our students to understand what they want and what they're needing at this time, because like everything else in the world, education changes through the time. So I think those are big ones that kind of jump up to me on you know, what our function is. And then interacting with the superintendent, really my time on the board, I've had the opportunity to have 2 superintendents and an interim superintendent, and each of those relationships are a little different depending on who they are and how they work. I'm really happy right now. We feel like we're a managing group of 8. And so we are able to discuss and kind of all go in the same direction, which unfortunately there are school boards out there that do not have that out there, and it makes it even a little tougher to get some stuff done. All right, Jan, what did I leave out?
I don't disagree with anything you said. I think my time on the board, I was elected in a recall election. So all the chaos that was going on, I didn't have to experience while I was on the board. And although the 7 of us weren't lockstep, we didn't have huge disagreements like the other board did. It was very divided. I was very fortunate to have served during that, you know, sort of peaceful times. But I think one of the things that we're doing these days is that school board meetings are virtual. Well, or they're available to view virtually. And so a lot more people are looking at those meetings. So you really have to be aware of how you present yourself and what you say. You got to take every opportunity you can to visit schools, talk to teachers, talk to students, talk to parents, and bring that back to the meeting. So people know that you're not just sitting up there for, well, I was gonna say an hour and a half, but 5 hours at a meeting. You have to prepare, and you have to show the public that, you know, you're really doing the work that they elected you to do. So it's different with superintendents sometimes, because they just assume that, oh, you're doing your thing, and well, I should say they all do that, but you're doing your thing and I'm doing my thing. You gotta have some kind of contact with your superintendent, even on a one-to-one basis, rather than out inside the meetings. It's not always easy, because you might not always get along with the superintendent, but you got to try. Like I said, just make sure you learn everything you can, and make sure the public knows that you're doing what you're elected to do. Everything that DJ said.
Great, thanks so much, Jan. And I actually want to we also have 2 other board members on the call. We have Diana Elliott from Strasburg, and then Lisa Webster from Summit County. If you 2 wanted to chime in on this question, that's great. If not, we're going to have plenty more discussion throughout the next 40 minutes or so. But yeah, we're just tackling this question right now. Then when board members are answering it, we're just going to open the floor here for some discussion with the rest of the attendees.
So Ben, what I will say, this is Diana Elliott from Strasburg. I agree with everything that DJ and Jan said. I think that I have found that every board functions a little bit differently. Some dysfunction a little bit differently. I'm lucky right now. We have worked hard as a board. We have a 5-member board to be pretty, I mean, I feel like we're very, very functional. We can always get better. But I think that one thing that the John Q. Public or whatever, our communities don't understand is the amount of work that goes into being a board member if you do it the right way. I mean, I think there are many who believe, you know, the time spent at the board meeting is really all there is. And I suppose, you know, if you show up, you can continue to be on the board. But if you really are working in the best interest of your students and your staff and your constituents, the members of the community, then you're going to study. You're going to pay attention to what's going on around you in your town, with knowing your students, knowing your staff, like DJ said, but as well as the state, because like it or not, the way we function is totally dictated by what goes on at the state and the national level. A lot of people don't, maybe viscerally, I mean, maybe a little bit they understand that, but they don't understand the potential for the amount of work that you can put into it. So that's what I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think one thing that I have wondered is how much authority school boards really have relative to the other entities, governmental entities that they're working with. And so that's something that sort of partially clears up that question for me. So thank you very much. All right.
I'd like to add something too. I just noticed the bottom part of that question too about influencing district policy. I was very involved before I got on the board, and one of the things that I did have to learn after getting on the board was policy changes, and really just any change that you want to make, it takes time. And it is unbelievable and frustrating at times about how much time it takes to make what I would consider common sense decisions or changes. I've been on the board for 4.5 years. And when I first got on the board, one of the things that I thought was crazy was that we did not have full-time counselors at all of our elementary schools, and we have some very large elementary schools. And it was something that I was pushing for before I got on the board, and then even after the board. And it took small steps a little bit. So like we had the district finally pay for half-time of the counselors, and then each school kind of came up with their other amount. But it took another 2 years really to get that going. And then we had a change in superintendent. There was also the COVID situation, which then brought more attention to mental health. So all of a sudden now we are focusing and throwing a lot more money into that, which is great, but it was a need before, and it was such a fight to do that. And so even things that you think need to be done that are common sense, trying to find the money and the willpower to make the change in a district sometimes is pretty difficult, especially the larger districts. I mean, it's a big ship to change direction a little bit. So influence is sometimes it's really hard to be consistent and just keep plugging away at, hey, we can do better, and try to drive that change.
Great,
I'd like to add something to that if I can. That's in the ideal situation when the board's working together and they're getting the input from committees and community members and parents and staff members. But I watched a board meeting of a district that shall be left unnamed, and there are people that usurp that power and unilaterally change language in policies that are being voted on. So you got to be on your toes. You got to look at the material that's given to you and make sure that it's what you're expecting, that it hadn't changed from when you were non-action to when it's action. Some people just are, they think they rule and they make unilateral changes. So you got to be on your toes and make sure you look at all the materials that are there.
I'll also add to that real quick too, is that sometimes you have people that are driven by the national conversation of different school things and don't dive in to learn about what our districts really are doing. And unfortunately, sometimes they can get elected to the board, and if they're in a majority, they can make a change that doesn't even, our district employees don't agree with, majority of our families don't agree with, and it really can it can screw up the flow of getting stuff done for even more years to actually get what should be done.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, DJ. And I think that appears to be what's happening in some boards around Colorado, certainly other boards that we hear about around the nation, which is a shame. And hopefully we can begin to do something about it. Now, I wanted to ask the other people on the call, the non-board members here, what other questions do you have? I know I have quite a few because I don't know much about boards, and I want to get stuck into being able to advocate. So sort of with an eye towards advocacy and your interest in education at the district level, what other questions for our board members do people on the call have?
I'm wondering about there's got to be some gray area between what is the superintendent's role and the school board, what is policy. I'm just wondering about times where, what is school board overreach, that, these superintendents bristle at certain things. What is that, where are those sort of gray areas in between the responsibilities?
I don't think they should be gray areas. They, if you know what you're doing, if you research what your role is, there shouldn't be gray areas. I think I see as often a superintendent overreach as I do see board overreach. There's a certain superintendent I know of that says, ask for forgiveness later rather than permission first. And if it's not pointed out, then that's the way it goes. And it's hard to reel that back in. So I think that comes with a board retreat or whatever, when you have a new board, when anyone's added to your board, so people leave and they're added to the board, you have a new board, and get together and find out how you know how to communicate, how to communicate best as a board with a superintendent, and get the ground rules set in the beginning. So there's no scrambling for who overstepped. That's important.
I will add that it was a kind of a tough thing for me to deal with too, is that for a while I kept getting told, well, you're getting too much into the weeds. And so, I really fought back on that quite a bit, saying, well, for me to ask good questions and have good understanding, I need to get more depth and understanding. And so that might be getting me in the weeds, but I believe that if a superintendent doesn't manage out of fear and and if they manage with teamwork, there shouldn't be that problem. And I would say that, we've had a newer superintendent for 2 years, and him having that attitude of being a team player with us makes it so much easier that, that you don't worry that you're crossing a line by asking a question or trying to get some more information to make a decision. And so I think that's very important, to have that partnership and not being too worried that we're stepping on someone's toes. Now, you want to be cautious maybe during a meeting, how you approach and ask things, so that you don't offend, your superintendent, or that he offends us either. But I think, having that communication is the huge key to it. And I do think that policy governance, if you go by the book, sometimes limits conversation. And so I think having, a little bit of the gray area that, we can ask and we can research and learn stuff without making a decision, but for us to ask good questions that the public really wants to understand better too in our community. So I think that is sometimes a tricky thing to do.
Hi, DJ. This is Sean Birkin, and thank you for your comments. I agree, actually, if you can get that synergy with the superintendent, if the board can get that superintendent synergy, that's the best model. Obviously, that doesn't always happen. So it's good to hear you say that. And thank you to all board members that are on the call here for serving. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Oh, sorry, Diana.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with DJ in the fact that there's a fine line, but we have I think he should still say he's new. He's been here 1 year and our superintendent and was initiated by fire. We had a late school start due to construction, and then unfortunately a staff member who was charged with child abuse and beloved member of the community. He had to deal with many things that some superintendents don't have to deal with in their entire career. But I feel like that the 5 board members and the superintendent, my 5 board members, my superintendent work a well-oiled machine. Maybe Jan said that. I'm not sure. I really do. And we police each other. If one of us is getting a little too much into the weeds, although I think that if a superintendent tells you you're getting too much into the weeds, then he does not understand the role that a school board plays, because we have to have that information before we can make those decisions. And sometimes he's the only one that you can go to get that information. So I hope he's not there anymore, DJ. I don't, but as I said, my board works together. We're pretty adamant about the role of the school board and the fact that the superintendent is our only employee. We don't hire and fire anyone else but that superintendent. It's none of our business. Anyway.
Thank you. For those of you who just joined the call right now, we are discussing a few questions, but sort of one really broad overall question, which is, what do school boards do? I think most of us are really familiar with the state legislature, but we wanted to take a deeper dive into the district level this meeting, figure out what school boards do, how they operate, ask some questions about policy, procedure, whatever it is that you feel like asking, and then from there, go on to more of the advocacy side of things at the district level. So just want to leave the floor open for people to keep asking questions. Max?
So I'm very brand new to this, so I apologize if this is a really obvious question, but does the school board legislate anything? And how do they interact with the budget?
Well, I don't know what you mean by legislate, but we
write policy and pass policy.
Yes, absolutely. That's our role. They are board policies. So when there is legislation that comes down and requires a change, we have to change that language or add a new policy. So we comply with legislation that's come through. We can we have a special need in our district, and so we can instigate a new policy that hasn't been legislated elsewhere because it's a need for our community and our schools. So that's a big part, and that's really the only, well, I shouldn't say only, but that's our major function. We make policy and we don't implement it. It's the superintendent that does that. So we do make policy.
With that budget, that's a really good question, because it's we've tried a few different things here, and one of them is we'll have what we feel is priority, our budget priorities that we will talk about and drive. One of the other things that I was a driving force on was getting us to have a strategic plan of multiple years out, seeing where we want the district to go. And so then you're able to kind of figure out, okay, if we want to do this, it's going to take some money, and how much can we do each year? If it's only for us, being able to put in 2 million this year and another 2 million year, can we get to where we want to get to? And so, on the budget aspect, that's important to have that vision and cooperation. But then, we also are the ones that, so we have to approve the contract that we do with our teachers association and our classified associations, which is difficult in that, unfortunately, there's not enough funds to get these people up to sometimes live in your town, or to be able to, at least buy a house. So, we have to try to make that balance of what is needed for our staff, what is needed for our students, and the amount of money that we are given to try to do that with. And a lot of times, again, I'm one of 7. So if I have a value and I think it's important that we're driving that, sometimes it takes convincing other board members, and it's also sometimes it really helps to have community also, bringing that up to the rest of the board members or the school district that, hey, this is something we need to really focus on. And so to be able to make budget changes, you have to kind of manipulate all those different things to make a change.
Thank you, DJ. Let's go to Jerry and then Dawn.
Hi, again, thanks for being on here. DJ, you mentioned a little bit of this. I'm curious the thinking of the board members here on relations with the teachers, other than salary. Where do you see the board's relationship with the teachers that are in the classrooms?
I think it's very important. I think I get frustrated again. Sometimes the national conversation that gets out there is so different than what reality is here. And our teachers association works extremely well with our district most of the time. And I think that what they do is hard to explain to people that are not in a classroom and don't have 25 voices all asking a question about the same time. And so I think it's very important that you have a good relationship with the teachers. I feel great to have their support. There are times that I'll have to say, that's not reality of what we can do, and sometimes that comes into trying the budget conversation and contracts. And, I would love to pay you more, but, we need to get new reading materials and we need to change some stuff. So I can't, we can't approve that much money. So I think it's great to have, again, an open communication and being able to explain what is reality. And I think if we are able to do that communication and let them explore some of their thoughts and concerns that might be coming from the national, I think we've actually been able to build a stronger unit. So I think the teachers associations, for most part, are doing a good job of looking out for the teachers and trying to drive what is best for our students and our communities also. So I guess that's my 2 cents.
Diana?
Sure.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, I'm sorry, Jan. Either order, it's fine.
Go ahead, because I have remarks.
I enjoyed hearing from teachers as well as from any individual that lived in the community, parents, anybody, because you're going to get their perspective, which is going to be different because they're in the classroom. What frustrated me sometimes is if the teachers were afraid to come to the board because they were told you got to come through the superintendent first, and that's just not fair. Especially if they live in the district, they're one of your employees. Well, they're employees of the district. whether they live in the district or not, they ought to be able to approach you. You know, if they live in their district, they have every right to talk to you just like anybody else that lives in the district. And it frustrates me if a superintendent were to tell them, no, you go through me instead of going to the board. So you got to make sure that you're open to listening to everybody, no matter if the superintendent tells them differently.
Great, Diana.
Well, I'm going to back up just a little bit, and I ended my comments by saying that hiring anybody else in the district was not my business. It is ultimately my business. I'm the one that's ultimately responsible for all employees. But there are channels that I can go through as a board member, or the board can go through if we don't see things that we want to see from an employee, and it's not by hiring and firing them directly. I can't go to anybody and say, I'm going to fire you because I don't like the fact that you gave my child an F. There are lots of more appropriate and by policy ways to do that as far as my school district is concerned. So don't think that I don't think it's my business, because it ultimately is, and that is the responsibility of the school board to be responsible for all of that. Strasburg is lucky in the fact that we don't have an active teachers representation or association or whatever. We also know that on any given day, you know, we could be dealing with those. We're a relatively small school district. I think the bottom line, doesn't matter how big your school district is, your relationship is based on trust. If your teachers and your staff and your administrators know that they can trust the school board to make decisions that are in the best interests of the students, then you've done everything that you can do. That's the majority of them. You know, you're not going to have everyone on board for that. As far as budget is concerned, yes, we need a strategic plan to do that. You cannot plan on how you're going to spend your money unless you have a direction. We have an excellent CFO who provides us with that input as we build our budget, and we make decisions based on priorities. Right now, we're building our strategic plan with the community. As a matter of fact, the board is just kind of sitting back and watching that happen. We'll make the ultimate decision, certainly. We want to know what the community's priorities are. What do you want to see come first? So that's what we're doing, and that's what our decisions will be based on in the future once that comes together. That's so important. How do you know how you want to spend your money if you don't have a plan? Yeah, I'll go buy that ice cream bar. I don't, but do I have enough money to pay the bills?
Great, thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Diana. We'll go to Lisa to finish out the question, and then we'll go over to Dawn with her question.
So I guess I wanted to talk on the budget part. I don't know if folks on the call realize that about 85% of school district budgets, and hopefully I'm not talking, I'm consistent with everyone else. Maybe it's more like 80 to 85% is for personnel costs, salaries and benefits. So that's a huge amount of our budget going to people, people who serve people, right? And then, and in terms of the budget, how we get our number is actually derived by a formula at the state. And I hope I'm not getting ahead of the conversation because we're going to be moving to advocacy here shortly, but it's derived by an actual formula. So if you are in a municipality or in multiple, like larger districts who get money from mill levies or mills, theirs isn't capped. Essentially, ours is capped. So our mill, for instance, this upcoming year for Summit is going to go, our mill levy is going to go down by about 2 mills because we don't get to keep, unlike our towns, we don't get to keep the extra money that higher assessments are going to drive into our property tax. So I guess I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. We'll go to Dawn, and then after Dawn, we've got probably time for one more question in this section. Then we're going to move on to our last discussion section of the day.
So while sitting here, I came up with 2 questions, so that's okay. My first one is, how do you keep the focus on the necessary work when there are some who want to only focus on those national distractions, while still making sure everybody feels like they have the opportunity to be heard? It seems like it's a fine line, kind of tricky, and I'm just kind of wondering how you can handle that.
I'll have a suggestion. I'm not currently on a board that has, I'm not currently on a board. When I was serving it, we relied on the president because they manage the discussion during the meeting. You've got an agenda, so you don't let it get hijacked about things that aren't really relevant to your district. You don't start talking about banning books if you're not banning books. So you don't let someone go off on that. People can have their say. If a board member is giving their report, they might have a comment that they read some article or they attended some event, but that it's up to the president to rein that in. So that's not the discussion, because that's not the business of the board at your meeting. So you have to rely on, you can't always rely on individuals to rein themselves in, but you have to rely on your leadership to make sure that discussion doesn't get out of hand. It's hard, but you gotta do that.
Thank you, Jane. And my second question is, like, what is the role of the school board in like advocating at the state level for like policy and legislation that's made at a different level, like lobbying and advocacy on that level?
Yes, go do it. I think most districts probably have some kind of a legislative agenda, you know, what they expect, and they're telling the community they're going to do. We did it when I was on the board, and there was bullet points of things that we wanted to talk to legislators about, and we relied heavily on CASB, and then we did have a lobbying group, and then now my district has a personal lobbyist, and they report back in, and the board talks to them, and it's a two-way communication getting that done, because they're there every day at the Capitol. But the board needs to show up, because the legislators don't just want to hear from lobbyists. They want to hear from regular folks, board members, and, you know, community members. They want to hear from them.
I'll add that I think it's very important not only to communicate with the legislators, but also to funnel that information back to your community. And it's one of the things that sometimes I run into legislators that I don't think they're sharing they're not sharing the information with their community, because they're asking for unrealistic changes or things to happen. And it's important to have that, again, another relationship that it's important to have with your legislators, so that you can help communicate and share where we really are with our education and our goals. You know, public education, unfortunately, is just it's getting beat up in public and national conversations at times, and it is not getting the funding that it needs, which makes its job even more difficult. But overall, we really do have great success. 97, 98% graduation rate, no. But what is reality for our students and our communities, there are a lot of public schools that are doing great jobs and making big changes for our students and their families in what we're able to offer and help guide them. And so it is a battle that if you have more consistency with your legislators and you're able to voice your opinion and share ideas, I think it really can help make changes easier. You know, I'm a big believer in making sure that we communicate with our legislators and making sure that they're very busy with a lot more stuff than just public education, even though that's a big part of their budget and they deal with, that we've got to make sure they understand what's happening on the ground in the real world. Again, not the national conversation that sometimes is there. and help guide them a little bit on that. But in the same aspect, we need to take the information that they get and what they do, we got to take it back to our community and share it too.
Ben's gone.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Dawn? Because I mean, school board members
Yes.
are just as important
Thank
as
you.
anybody else, and I guess, you know, if they're hearing from squeaky wheels, they probably want to also hear from the people that are elected to make those decisions. So
Makes sense. Thank you.
I'll also talk about that, you know, it's an educated voice that they get to hear from. You know, as long as we are board members doing our work and doing our reading and diving in, we have the experience to help guide that. And I know as a board member, the parents and community members that serve on different committees and take the time to really dive in, I don't know if I wouldn't say you value their opinion more, but you have more faith in what they're saying, I guess, a little bit, and they have a little bit better understanding of the big picture. And so, you know, it's important to have that partnership.
Great. Thank you, DJ. So I think after hearing about what goes on at the district level, what kinds of policies are decided and made at the district level, you know, relationships with teachers. And then I think this idea that a lot of us have baked into our heads right now, just from watching national news and even local news, of these raucous crowds of people being the only advocates that show up to school boards. And while that's not true, I think that a lot of times it can be a deterrent to people getting involved. And so the next question is, what are the best ways for public education advocates, like the people on this call, to get involved, to make change, to form relationships with their board members at the district level? So I will go ahead, as we did with the last question, let the board members answer that question. We'll give about 5 minutes for that, just because we're 15 minutes left today. And then for those last 10 minutes, we can go ahead and ask questions and perhaps make some action plans too.
I'll just say that I'll listen to anybody that, when I was on the board, I'm not on the board, I would listen to anybody. But if I knew that someone had been involved with their school or their district on a committee, part of the SAC, part of the DAC, part of their PTA, I know that they have a certain amount of knowledge. Otherwise, they're just another person that has an opinion. And at least I know that if you're already involved in some way, you've been on a committee, you've been on a policy committee, you've been on, you know, a myriad of committees that the district have, I know that you're getting that information. So I know that you've taken the time and you've learned. So I think that's a good credibility that you could have on your side to make sure that the school board listens to you.
I ditto that. I think it's the more involved you are in some of those committees or in your schools, it just gives a little something extra to the conversation. But there are plenty of parents and community members that I've talked to that they have great ideas, and I think their heart is in the right direction. Sometimes just how slow the process is sometimes, and trying to communicate with them how we can do little steps to make that change sometimes is important. But I think it's important to reach out and see with your board member if you know, what their thoughts are, but maybe they can help plug you into a different committee of whatever your passion is a little bit.
And even if you're not willing to make a commitment for the whole year on a district level committee, you can still go to their meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And if you tell the board member that you said, I've been to these meetings, I'm not a committee member, but I've been there, I can't commit to that, but I'm listening and I'm learning, and here's what I think. Because not everybody gets to devote 40 hours a week to their school district.
Very good point.
Yeah, it is. I would agree with both Jan and DJ, it's my responsibility to listen to people. It doesn't matter whether I agree with them. I'd rather hear from people I don't agree with. I want to know how, how satisfied they are with the work that we're doing. And if they're not, then I typically ask them, well, what do you think we ought to do? As an individual, I certainly can't commit to anything. And I think that's one thing that board members need to remember, is the fact that when I'm standing there one-on-one with the person, I am not a board member. I'm a board member, but I can't take any action. But I typically recommend that they join. And that's one thing that I have done and taken, especially those people who come to me and have complained. I've gone to them directly and asked them to be on our strategic planning committee, because I want to know what they have to say. That's where you get your best work done. But it's my job. And I took that on when I ran for the school board, to listen to everyone. So I think one thing though that happens is that people are intimidated and they're afraid to go to you. So again, you have to develop that trust and that approachability so that people will come to you, and then give them a list. I don't know, maybe we should all make a list of all the ways that they can become involved and just hand it out every time we talk to someone. I don't know.
And I like that, because sometimes people don't take it upon themselves to join. If you ask them, I'd like you to be on that committee.
Mhm.
Wow, okay, someone asked me, they want me. So that's a good point.
Lisa, would you like to add anything?
No, I mean, I think they pretty much said it all. So yes, I would say get involved with committees, ask. Invitation is a great way, as Jan and Diana pointed out, to get people to participate, because yeah, sometimes they just don't know how to go about participating. And I ditto what they say. Yes.
Great. And then let's go ahead, and we've got 11 minutes left. Let's go ahead and open it to discussion. Any questions? Concerns, firmly held convictions? Come on.
I guess it's another question about public comment. I mean, I think a lot of people think if you want to get something across to a school board, you go and you make public comment. How important is it? Do you ever follow up with people who have said something at a public hearing, and then, to pursue it more? I just think that that's the way that most people know to connect with your school board. It's the most public way, and it's also the most intimidating. But how important is it, and can it be an effective way for an entry point for people?
I'll go.
Absolutely.
We all
Sorry.
have something to say. Go ahead. Lisa?
Okay, I'll start. So hopefully this person, before they have come to public comment, they've worked through like their local school, whether it's their teacher, the administrator, or the building leader, and work their way up. And hopefully the board is the last, in my mind, is the last resort. Although, yes, to Diana's point, we're open to, that's our role, is to listen to the public. But they also need to know that because they're coming to public comment, the expectation should not be a conversation about that public comment. That is just a place where we listen, because we have a business agenda in place to go through, and there should be follow through, and it depends on your policies at your local, in your local board. A lot of times, or at least for us, our president is the one who does the responses. So it's funneled through, but we are CC'd on those responses, so we're aware. And it should be followed up with the superintendent acting if there is something operational in those public comments, which a lot of times it's more operational than it is for the board. I'll let someone else chime in.
I think that's a great point, that those meetings where you're getting public comment, those are business meetings. They're not public forums. And there should be other avenues to listen to your public and have some kind of dialogue, some kind of conversation that's not taking place at a business meeting. And the way the world is now, that, like I said, most of the, well, not most, I don't know most, but many school districts have their meetings recorded or it's broadcast live. Those are just so those people can hear themselves talk. And it's not necessarily to get a response from the school board. They just have an opportunity to put it out there to the world. So that it's really not asking for a conversation. So you listen to it, but I think there's better formulas to have conversations with the public on things like that. Shouldn't take place at a business meeting.
Jerry, sorry, go ahead. And then
No,
Jerry.
I just wanted to add, but those public comments go on public records. So it's a place of documentation.
So what are other avenues of community that you see as communicating with the board outside of board meetings? Because you're right, most board meetings are business meetings. There's a set agenda. There is place for public comment, but usually it's like 2-3 minutes. And there's a long list of people, and it's very hard to get a point across with any efficiency. So what other ways, are there? I mean, I don't know if email is appropriate or other.
Email's
Yeah.
email's a great way to start, the conversation, but I personally love face-to-face. And so, if you want to suggest a meeting and we can sit down and talk about something, I think it's a great use of my time and yours to really start where we can get better understanding about things. I will say there's sometimes that, as was mentioned earlier, it's a procedural problem that I can't control. I can look into why we're having that issue and try to get an understanding of it. But there are times when it's sometimes just informational for us to gain and to be able to prod different avenues for our superintendent to make some changes or to have better understanding. One of the questions earlier too was like, people get worked up and they come and voice their opinion there about maybe, again, national conversations. But I think it's important to have the superintendent, the president, be able to speak to those concerns and that we don't just ignore them. And you're not necessarily speaking to them right then, but you're going to follow up in emails or you're going to make a statement at your next meeting. But some of those things, not addressing it just makes it fester sometimes. And I personally am one more of just a direct conversation and do it. And sometimes you get a little gun shy because of the lawyers that get involved of, you're going to get sued about doing this or that. And sometimes that does make it a little bit harder to communicate openly.
One-on-ones are good, but I think in general, people like, oh, DJ's gonna, I can convince him he's gonna be on my side. I'm gonna talk to him, but I'm not gonna go talk to Jan because that's not gonna work. So I think the more opportunities that all the board members have to listen to the same people talking and telling about their experiences, the better. And I like, you can anticipate an issue. If it's a dress code, if it's a safety issue, if it's whatever it is, you convene a forum, a conversation just on that subject, and people can come and talk about that. It doesn't have to be at a school. It doesn't have to be at your, regular board venue. And you get the chance to dialogue with folks, which you don't do at a board meeting. And I think that's important because that's sometimes what they're looking for, because they'll do their 3 minutes and then like, aren't you guys going to say anything? Well, no, we're not. This is a business meeting. So we need to have a forum to be able to discuss things like that. Even if you do table talks, you get in rounds of, each board member keeps moving amongst tables. That's a good thing. I see in the chat that there's a talk about what's the role as a business meeting or a work session. In my experience, a work session, anybody could have come to those, but it's not a place to have a dialogue with the public, it's getting information to the board that you're not getting at a business meeting. You're hearing, here's what the issues are. The superintendent's going to lay out some issue or some plan, or this is what we're thinking. And it's to get information to the board members. It's not just reading a 40-page paper. So I don't think the public has in our district, at least, they don't have a role except attending and listening in a work session. So.
Yeah, for us, a work session a lot of times is we are having more dialogue with district employees, and so we're able to kind of go back and have a better understanding of our reading curriculum that we're going to change, and for us to learn more about science of reading. So, I'll touch a little bit on the comment that Joseph made too, that yes, we need to do a better job of getting all of our students to read, but there is not everything is in our control as a school district. There are so many other factors that are out there that are affecting these kids in being able to go home and read. And so, making sure that our community can work together to help these kids is another avenue that as a school board, I'm out there advocating with our city council and with our county about different ways that we can help our students and community so that they have more of an access so that they can use their time and energy well for school.
Thank you, DJ.
We're running out of time, but I think we should talk about this open meeting and records.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jan, we have 1 minute left. I'm willing to go just a couple minutes over. I want to respect people's time though. So let's go ahead and get this question right here from Liz. How can you briefly speak to how sunshine laws impact the ability of board members to have conversations outside of meetings? It's a very hot topic right now. Sunshine laws are open meetings and records laws. So
everything I've been talking about is a public meeting. You just say, I'm not going to say, DJ, you and me and Diana are going to go talk at, Wendy's. That's not happening. It's a chance for the community to come in and talk to the board and, senior staff. It's public. You post it, you're all going to be there. It's not going to fall behind anything that's not legal. So that's the best way to do it, all open, because people know they're invited.
Well, and just to kind of combine the two questions about the difference between a business meeting and a work session. Work sessions, we can't take a vote. The only time we can take a vote is in a business meeting. That would include, if necessary, and there are guidelines for executive sessions as well. Yeah. Now, what's I going to say though? Yeah. That's it.
I'll add that the sunshine law is good and it makes a lot of sense. It does sometimes, because of that, sometimes the outside of a board meeting, your conversations are all one-on-one. And so if you want to get some understanding of how the other board members are thinking, you got to sit down and make those calls or have those meetings one-on-one, which are good and vital in trying to get understanding of your whole board. And it does happen that way. But I think everyone is very cautious and understanding of the law and making sure that we don't ever get into for us, it's anytime there's 3 of us anywhere near anything, it's like, hey, what's going on? You want to be very careful about what you're doing. And so it also, different events and stuff that we have, we want to make sure that we're very careful about that also.
Yeah, just, there are, of course, in a smaller town, you all go to the same activities. And so we make sure as board members, we don't sit together. More than 2 of us. I mean, we kind of laugh every time you just talk to the hand, I can't talk to you, but that's what we do to make sure. Just a side note, it's like, isn't it interesting that the board is held to such strict standards, but yet our legislature is not?
Well, they may.
Hopefully, yes.
Yep.
Well, we have reached the end of our time for tonight. We do have one more question in the chat. Board members on the call, would you mind if I directed that to you. It looks pretty simple. It's about parent groups, and then got back to our asker after this, or we could stay on for an extra minute or two. I don't mind doing that either. I just want to see what's best for everybody here.
I can still talk, but I think the question was about work sessions.
There's a question about it's a newer one, I believe. Let me get to it real quick. Sorry, I can't do
A
that.
work session should include how to interact with parent-teacher groups. Well,
Yes, that's it, right? Sorry. Yeah.
that's
yep.
up to the board if they want to say, how do we want to approach this? Like we had meetings with our employee groups, and maybe you want to say you're going to have an annual meeting with parent groups. You know, so if you want to do that, you can have a work session to see how that's going to go about. But I think at a regular work session, you don't invite certain groups because you're not intending to have conversations with them. Like DJ said, you're talking with district staff and among board members about learning about something and how you might approach something. So I don't see how any other outside group would be invited to a work session to make comments unless the work session is about how to interact with those groups. I don't know if that.
We have a group, we have a parent group in our district. We call it our district advisory board. And, you know, we try to get parent representation from all of each of our schools. And then we have a board liaison that goes to that meeting all the time. But then we also rotate sometimes different board members in there to talk about different issues. You know, is that's one of our avenues. As Jan was talking about, we've also done, especially before COVID, we had like a monthly meeting where we would have, you know, at least 3 to maybe all of our board members show up, and we could hear and talk about different issues with parents and communities. And we would rotate that sometimes in different parts of our town, you know, close to different high schools or something too, to try to make sure we were getting, you know, throughout the whole district, which is quite large for us. But, you know, there's different avenues that we have tried. And to be honest, we need to get better at doing it again. I think because things have gotten so angry out there that sometimes it's hard to have a conversation out there and have those groups. But you know, we need to do a better job of getting out there and listening and having those conversations in those groups.
I'll just say from our perspective, we're a bit smaller than DJ's Hooter district, but we used to also have coffees where 2 of us would go, because for us, our district is a district of 7. And if you have more than 2 of us, we have to post it as a meeting so anyone can attend. And so anyone knows where we are and that we're there to listen and have conversation. And then we report back to the board.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, Lisa, when I stuttered. Anytime that we have more than 2 board members present, that we know they're going to be there, then we do post it. And we're trying to be really careful about that. We've got a town celebration coming up where we're going to have a board booth. So we'll have to post that because we're all planning on being there.
But you shouldn't be afraid if there's a 4th of July parade and you happen to know that DJ and Diana and Lisa are all going, you don't have to post that because it's not your meeting, and it's not, I mean, you're on that street and I'm on this street and we're down the hall. Just because you happen to going to be there, no one can say that you're breaking the open meeting laws just by not posting it.
Well, and you're right, but we are overly cautious in that manner because that's where.
Well, if you're having a booth, yeah.
Where a lot of people are landing. Same with the basketball games and volleyball games. Where we're landing, you know, it's like, well, I saw you 3 sitting together and you were laughing and you looked like you were talking about something important. Did you make decisions or not, you know, in public? So anyway.
And we're overly cautious also. So if we know, and yes, at a 4th of July parade, we probably aren't posting it, but we do make a concerted effort that, you know, if I do run across someone, I'm just like, hey, I'll talk to you later. And then I just keep moving along.
Yeah.
Because it's perception. Part of it's a perception. We won't talk about business outside of a business meeting, but it's a perception of, you know, having a group of us together that looks like that it could be us talking about business
It is.
in public.
See, what you don't give up. Now, just a reminder to everyone that we've got school board elections coming up this fall. So if you're interested, pick up a petition at your school after August 9th.
Yes.
And you can run. And I gotta go. So thank you all.
Thank you to our board members.
Good seating.
Yeah, coming here and talking to us about boards, how we can get involved. As always, there is a recap coming on Friday. We talked about a lot, so it should be nice and long, along with the recording. And please go ahead and check out those links in the chat, register for our Action Summit, and register before anybody else gets to for the next Advocates Network. All right, thanks everybody so much. And I think we're good to stop recording.